Yes, I recognize a number of you, of course. I was pastor for a few of you, Jerry and Susie and Deb Queen and Michelle, of course, I know, and a number of others. I know probably about maybe one third of you from chat. Probably is that about right? That's not about right. A number of you from chat because our church is in. Matter of fact, your pastor took part of my district when I left. It is written 3 years ago, and the pastor you currently have used to have my district. I took his place before he went to Rhode Island, and he came here. So I'm waiting for one of those two to take my place. It is written one of these days as we play these musical chairs. It's probably, I look at it's 12:15 or so, and my sermon isn't short. So I'm going to probably ask you to step up and stretch a little bit because it may be another, if you want to do so, now's a good time to stretch your legs, get a little blood flowing. So there's none of that going on. Okay. There you go. All right. All right. That's good. Breath in, deep breathing. Very good. Yeah, sure. Amen. And I kind of figured it wouldn't be an issue here, but you guys are fantastic. When we start smelling food, right, then we have to stop. It is written. I've always been a great respecter of it is written, going back, probably even before I realized. Now, I'm not referring to the it is written that I currently work for. I'm referring to, when Jesus is in the wilderness and there's challenges and temptations, and it is written was what he said, right? It is written, referring to God's word. It is written. It's something that I didn't even realize years and years ago that I had that respect for it, that I found out through life that not everyone does. And, years ago when George Vandeman was the speaker director for It Is Written, which he started in 1956, February. And I grew up as a child in the 70s and 80s and never heard of George Vandeman, never heard of Mark Finley, Sean Boonstra, and now John Bradshaw. None of those people, especially the later ones, of course, when I was younger. If I was to get my spiritual feeding, I would have probably turned to the priests and the nuns and maybe Pope John Paul II at the time, as you can kind of figure out where I came from. And so today I'm going to be speaking to you about my testimony from It Is Written to It Is Written. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Father in heaven, I thank you so much, Lord, for your word that guides us. I just pray as we open it that we can be led by your Spirit, Father, in understanding what it is that you have, the message you have for each one of us today. I thank you for my testimony, Lord, and I pray that it be an inspiration as the young girl prayed in children's story, that something could be gleaned, something could be learned from this presentation, from my testimony today. All honor and glory to you, Father in heaven. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Our text today, there's a number we could have gone to, but I'm just going to go to the text that was read, Acts chapter 2. And there's verse 47. I'm going to read verse 39 first, then 47. Acts chapter 2 and verse 39 says, "For the promise is to you and to your children and to all who are afar off, as many as the Lord our God will call." So who is going to be calling those coming in? Yeah, the Lord our God will call, right, as it says there. Then jump to verse 47, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved. So who's adding to the church daily? The Lord, right? And you have in, Matthew 9, 38, and you have again in 16, 18 or so, another couple of verses that say very similar things. That is my church, God says, I will build my church. And so the Lord does the calling, doesn't he? He does the work, but does he keep us involved or not involved? We're very much involved, right? He uses us. But sometimes we, and I have to confess to this, fall short on that, and we are not heavily involved as we should be. And there are those who are seeking right close by who could probably be sitting in the pews here. And in the case of, for me, that's what happened. I did not have a Seventh-day Adventist approach me. I didn't even never heard of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and I was 30 years old. And so the Lord worked, he did the calling, of course, and he used people, of course, but I didn't get to the Seventh-day Adventist Church because of another Seventh-day Adventist, okay? So I want to start with my story, my history. As you can know from my beginning comments, that I was raised, what religion? Catholic. And I was very serious Catholic because my mother was born in, if you know the history of Ireland, you know that there is a divide there, and there's Northern Ireland, which belongs to part of like the United Kingdom, and then you have the Republic of Ireland, as it is now. And the Republic of Ireland is very high percentage Catholic, and then Northern Ireland is a mix, but probably more Protestant, but pretty much of a mix. My mother, and there was fighting, skirmishes, lots of that going on. My mother was born and raised in the 1930s on the border, but the north end, just barely into the Republic of Ireland. Sorry, into Ulster, which is Northern Ireland. And so she had a history of hatred toward Protestants that she wouldn't really show much, but that was just there. It was natural. She was raised that way. That was the environment she raised in. So when she came to the United States and met my father and married and had their 6 boys, no girls, we were raised in that environment. My father was French Canadian, Catholic 100%, my mother as well. And so we would sometimes go to the Mass in Providence, Rhode Island, where it was done in French sometimes, or Latin. Excuse me. And I was an altar boy, Catholic schools. And early on, when I was just about the time, just before I was an altar boy, probably at my like 8, 9 years old, I felt a calling to do something. And of course, that God was calling me, and within the Catholic system, you probably would be only one of a couple of things. One would be a priest. That's your first thing, and perhaps a deacon. If you knew anything about the Catholic Church, the deacons do exist, but they are like priests, but they can't call Jesus down into the bread. They can't do the transubstantiation. That's about it, though. They pretty much do almost everything else, and they can be married. And then there's Catholic missions, and those are the ones that was in my mind, mostly priests or a Catholic mission. And so I would express that vocally to people that I wanted to be a priest, which was extremely rare, because you wouldn't find too many people who would ever say that or admit that, especially since back in the 1970s or so, the amount of U.S.-born Catholic priests going to the seminary was down to almost nothing. And so they were very, very concerned about this, as they still are, the Catholic Church. And so I would, say it, and the bishops would come to the church about once a year. It was a large church. This church had about 10,000 members. So you'd have masses, 6 or 7 masses a weekend, and some would have 1,000 in it, some would have 100 in it. But, overall, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 would attend, and 10,000 or so members. And the bishops would come, and they would always ask, when they get all the altar boys together, if you know what an altar boy is, someone who serves up on the platform. And about 20 of us or so would always ask, who would want to be a priest here? And I would my hand would shoot up, and people looking at me kind of strange, all the kids my age looking at me kind of strange. And so they got to know me by name. And so when the bishops would come, there's 2 bishops, either one would come. They would do the same thing every time, because they're trying to get people started in that. And he would, where's Michael every time? Where's Michael? He's the one who wanted to be a priest. Interestingly enough, weeks after I left the Catholic Church, I received a letter. I have it in my bag. I still have a letter from a Catholic priest saying, I heard that you run. I never met this person. He replaced somebody at the church that I used to attend. And he said, I heard that you want to be a priest someday. I'm always here for questions, answers, et cetera, on and on, a letter. And I thought it was kind of strange that I got that, and I had never met this priest, and it had been years. But anyway, as I get older, as I was a teen now, I kind of had like second thoughts. I wanted to get married. I never saw a deacon. I actually never heard about the deacon stuff until later on, actually, in the Catholic Church. And so here I am now, getting older and having second thoughts, maybe still. And then I went into school for engineering as I had to do something, make some kind of decision. And I went through and I studied engineering and came out and I was working as an engineer. And I was 27 years old and I was single. And I went to the Catholic priest who was a new one. He was there about maybe 2 years, and he was somebody I connected well with. He was in his 30s, and I was in my 20s, and we would kind of talk a bit. And we kind of started a youth group there in a large church because one of my complaints was, hey, it's a large church, and I can't get to know any other single women there. So it's kind of hard to be able to marry a Catholic because that's all I was going to marry. And so he and I would sometimes go out and discuss this over a beer or two, at a local pub. And yeah, and so yeah, well, most other outside the Seventh Adventist Church, most other ministers believe that Protestant or Catholic that drinking in moderation is okay. Yeah, that's what most other ones do, not all. And that's what this priest believed as well. And he wasn't, just we had one beer, two, just talking and that kind of thing. And so we ended up. It was later on. I felt that very strange. At the time, I did. And so I ended up sitting down with him in confession. You can do a confession. You can have that little screen there where they don't see you, or you can sit face to face. You can choose that. And so I chose to sit down face to face and told him, "Hey, Father Joe, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I've always had a desire, 15 years now, no, 20 years now, said to be a priest." Really? Well, eyes lit up because, of the dearth of priests entering in the seminary. And so we talked for a while, and he says, hey, would you want to come with me to a seminary preparatory school in Providence, Rhode Island, to spend a day there, spend a Saturday all day there and see how the life of a priest would be, and just to get a feel. I said, sure. And so we went, arranged that day, went early in the morning, spent the whole day there. Of course, it's not glamorous. I didn't expect it to be. I knew it wasn't going to be. And at the end, he said, so what'd you think? I said, it's kind of what I thought it was going to be, pretty much. We headed home. I said, we talked for a while in the car. I said, I'll make you a promise, I said, that I'd like to get married as well. And I'm 27. I said, the Lord hasn't provided a wife for me yet. I said, if I don't find my wife, the Lord hasn't provided a wife by 30, then I'll go into the seminary. And so 28 goes by and 29 goes by and I turned 30. And that was ringing my mind, ringing. And I said to myself, I said 30, right? And I don't turn 31 for another 365, 4 more days. So as long as I have 30 by my name, I'm okay. And so in the middle of that year was when everything started happening. And I met my wife. My wife's from Dominican Republic. I met her about halfway through that year. We were going to a club because I used to bartend to learn Spanish. I was learning Spanish, and at the time I was bartending there. Not a good way to learn Spanish. It's not, it's not a good place to be, period. But I'm just saying you just don't get a chance to speak to people as much. And so I was there, and I had quit the job, and I was going back just to visit there, to hang out. I could try and get free drinks there, whatever it was. And because I had worked there for a few years. And someone else invited themselves along with me from work and brought my wife with her. And that's how my wife came from a pretty serious Catholic family. She had to be chaperoned everywhere she went. And so we went, and I met her, and I'm talking to her there, and okay, we had a lot in common. She was doing the same engineering that I was doing, about 10 years, earlier, and same school, same teachers, but hitting it off a little bit. And I said, "Are you Catholic?" And she pulls out a cross. And she says, "Are you Catholic?" Right back to me. And I said, yes, I was considering to be a priest. Okay. That was my little trump card. And so we both then relax and continue with the conversation. And so now everything's okay. Enter into the situation a man named Javier. He was another Dominican guy. He worked with me, and I used to practice my Spanish with him. And he was Catholic. And he would come to me and ask questions all the time in the Bible. He had a yearning in his heart for it is written, what was written by God. And he had something major happen to his life 3.5 years earlier, and he was reading the Bible. He had read it through a few times, and he was seriously studying it. He would always ask me questions because I had a reputation as being very Catholic. And so he would ask me questions, and I did, maybe every Easter time, I would read through on that Holy Week before Easter, the 4 Gospels. And that was kind of what I would do every year. That was my exposure to the Bible. I just read through it pretty quickly, as you read a book. And Javier came to me. This is and I mentioned meeting my wife when I did was because this was a couple of days later. And Javier came to me at work, all wide-eyed, and he says, "Michael, we've got to study the Bible." something big is happening. And I was like, okay. And Javier was very, very tense. He was very serious. And I thought he was actually a little crazy. Seriously, because I started avoiding him. I said, okay, yeah, sure, I'll come to a Bible study. What came to my mind was my big Catholic Bible I had sitting on the coffee table there that weighed about 15 pounds. And I said, oh, that's not really what you do, to bring to a Bible study. I don't really have the right Bible or so. And so he looked kind of crazy. And so at work, I'd kind of avoid him because he was always like steering, when are you going to come over? And so finally, after 2 weeks of that, and I would just seriously, I was, Javier's downstairs that way. I'm going to go this way, whatever, just to avoid him, because he seemed really way overboard. He was, and so never a bit of a smile on his face, super serious. When are you coming over? And so finally, I went right to him. I said, "This is going to get this over with." And I went to said, "Javier, I'll be at your house today after work. What time works for you?" He said, 7:00. I said, "Okay, give me directions." He lived in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, which is an older town. If a lot of the older towns in New England, you have these what used to be probably like horse and buggy trails that aren't very straight. And so there's lots of winding, twisting roads, lots of roads, very confusing. And I grew up in Rhode Island, and Pawtucket, Rhode Island was always very confusing for me. This is before GPS. And so he gave me his directions how to get there from the highway. And sure enough, Satan always is working. Because right then, I went back to my workstation, and another guy calls me over. And who happened to be Javier as well. A different one. He was one of the ones who owned the club that I worked for, bartending. And he said, "Michael, remember you helped me a couple of months ago buy that computer?" I said, "Yes." Pick a computer up for him. He said, "Yes." He said, "I'm having problems with email." This is back in this was 97, 98. And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I can probably help you with that. You live in the same town as Javier. To Javier, in the same town." I said, "Could I come by at 6? That way I can go there and go over to the other one and kill two birds with one stone." He goes, "Yeah, sure, 6:00 will work." He gave me his address. And so I went right to the Catholic bookstore, got my little Catholic Bible, study one. I remember the lady right now trying to convince me, why are you buying that one? Why don't you buy one that has study notes in it, Catholic study notes in it? And I said, "No, this is fine." It's like $4, and that's what I wanted, something cheap. I was okay, and I left. It was kind of strange. A lot of those little strange things were happening. Lots of them all over the place. I get to Javier number one's house to help with the computer. And, he's quite irreligious. And we're there and I'm helping him. It was a pretty simple thing. And then I'm there. It's like 6:30 and I have plenty of time to get to Javier's house. And I have my Bible with me. I brought it in. I don't know why I brought it in, but I brought it into his house. And he says, "Oh, what's that in your hand?" Because it wasn't a leather. It was just, regular colored cover. I said, "Oh, it's the Bible." "What are you doing with that?" I said, I'm going to a Bible study," which, in the English speaking Catholic church, you never see that. We never did in my time, ever. But in Spanish speaking, you would. They'd have Bible studies. They would, in circles, they would. And so he said, Bible study. Says, I could never figure that out. People get around in a circle and they sit there and they study about the Bible and they talk and they talk. And they sit there for 2 hours and whatever. So obviously he had experience in this. He said, "What a waste of time," he said. "Why aren't they going out in that same time period and just going out and feeding somebody? Or going out and bringing some clothes to somebody? Or doing something good?" And I said, "Yeah, you're right." And so I sat there listening to him. He complained for a while about this. And so I'm sitting there and all of a sudden it's 7:30. An hour went by. And, of course I'm working on Spanish time here, If you understand the joke, my wife's Hispanic and she understands. I've been around Spanish for 30 years. I speak Spanish. It's an easy to work with. It really works very well for somebody who sometimes comes up late, like myself. And so I go over to the other Javier's, but I couldn't find it because it was the directions from the highway. And it's like that maze. And I'm not bad with directions. And this is just, I get to the place and it's a one-way road here. It's all like one-way roads. And I drive by, it's around here somewhere. Can't see it. Now, this is in early February of 1998. And here I am, and it's dark, pitch black, and it's like 8:00 at night, and I'm driving around. I go around again. Each loop takes 5 or 6 minutes. 1, 7, 8 times around. I said, I've done my fair share of attempts with this. I went out and bought the Bible, and now I'm at the house. I'm in the area. I couldn't find it. I'll see him at work tomorrow and just let him know, sorry, I tried so many times. And I'll just omit the part that I was an hour late on my own. But I tried so many times. And I did something occurred to me. He said, pray. We're never in the practice of doing that. And I said, Father, if the house is around here, please, Father in heaven, where is it? Show me it. That's it. And opened my eyes. And I had pulled over and I was parked right in front of it. And I had driven by it almost 10 times. And I'm like, okay, put the car in the store, put it off. Okay, it's a 3-story older home. It's each one is an apartment. I go to the first door and it's all dark inside, and I knock on it and ring the doorbell. Nothing, nothing. Knock on it harder. I said, now I can tell Javier that I tried, an A effort here. Nothing. So I walk down the stairs. It's cold. I can see my breath, and I'm getting to the car, and something tells me, go around back. And so it's not one of those, you don't hear the voice, just the impression, go around the back. And that's the Lord speaking to you. And so I go around the back there, and I'm like, is there going to be a dog out here or something? I don't know. I'm in the backyard, and I look up in the back and I see a little light on the 3rd floor, but it had one of those, you had to go inside the outdoor stairways, which is enclosed. And so I'm going up and I'm all this noise. I'm like, it's like 8:30 at night. And I'm like in the middle of winter. And I'm like afraid someone's going to call the police on me. I get to the top and I just gingerly did this because I was thinking of bothering somebody. And he opens the door. It was Javier, and he had the most calm look on his face. And again, I wasn't sure if it was, just the fact that, hey, I'm an hour and a half late, if it's just the Spanish time or what it was, but he was so relaxed. And we went in, and I was so happy that he wasn't chewing me out because I know if it was, U.S. time, the guy would have been hitting his watch. What are you doing an hour and a half late? So we go inside, where time was not much of an issue, and it was just relaxed in there. And I kind of adopted a lot of that Hispanic style myself in my life, unfortunately. That I get late to a lot of places. If you see, I got here today, was at 10:45, almost 11. So I ended up sitting down with Javier, and he started asking me a series of questions. He said, the 10 Commandments, who wrote the 10 Commandments? And I said, God did. With his finger. I had known that. He said, maybe I sort of moved around, but I know him. And he said, okay, the 10 Commandments is from God, then what if I were to tell you that if someone were to come to you, he said, if someone were to come to you and say, the 10 Commandments of God are no longer in effect, would you believe them? And I said, no, of course not. What if someone were to say, one of the commandments was no longer in effect? Would you believe that? I said, no, of course not. He said, where would that come from? Where would that come from? If someone were to tell you that, would that be from God? I said, no, of course not. Then you know who it would come from. Let's open our Bibles to Deuteronomy and Exodus 20 version of it. Went to Exodus 20 and we went through the first commandment. Okay. Well, the God before him. Second commandment. What's that? That's rather long. I knew my catechism because I was a serious Catholic. I knew it better than almost anyone I knew. I'd be in that 0.01 percentile of Catholics on how much I knew about the Catholic faith and Catholics. And I was like, I had never seen that one before. And what flushed to my mind as we talked about idols and the images and bowing down in worship was what it was. Every church I had been to, almost everyone, was loaded with idols and images. And then the one I was attending to help learn my Spanish better was a cathedral-sized church in Providence, Rhode Island, where my father had attended when I was a French mass. Actually, it was Latin, and but all French people were attending. And when that was a Spanish one, I had been attending now for a number of years to help with my Spanish. And I just remember it's just God painting on the ceilings, all statues everywhere, all the the stations of the cross, Mary and Joseph up front, everyone bringing their kids up there and then having their kiss the feet of Mary and Joseph, all that stuff. And I said, well, I can probably find one of those new modern Catholic churches that don't have all that stuff, because there are some. I said, okay, that's exactly what went to my mind at that moment, as I kind of get a little more serious now, because he didn't stop there. Third commandment, okay. Fourth commandment says the fourth commandment's about the day of rest. I said, yeah. And I hadn't even put in my mind third, fourth. I wasn't thinking. The third was the Catholic way of doing it. And he said, the day of rest. Now, he had to say the day of rest in Spanish. He didn't say to me the actual word for Sabbath. Many of you know what the word for Sabbath is in Spanish. Okay. Sábado is Saturday, And so in the most common Spanish used Bible, yes, Michelle? Yeah, Dia de Reposo, I was going to say. And the common most, exactly as I said, the common most used Spanish Bible is the Reina Valera 1960 version, which all the Protestant churches use, and Catholics use a different one. But in there, every time it say Sabbath, it would say Saturday in Spanish, sábado. Little asterisk. On the bottom, it would say Dia de Reposo. No, sorry, reverse. Dia de Reposo, day of rest. Asterisk. On the bottom, it would say sábado. So they would do that because there was a lot of questioning, I'm sure. Why are we going to church on Sunday when everywhere it says that Jesus did all these miracles on Saturday? That's what it says. And so they changed that around. And so he said, when's the day of rest? The holy day of rest, he said to me. And I said, oh, it's Sunday. He goes, no, what day of the week is that? I said, the seventh day. I knew that. He said, what day is Sunday then? He said, I said, Sunday the seventh. And what came to my mind, remember these things come into your mind instantly, were the nuns in Catholic school. And a couple of times they would tell you on a Monday, students, what day of the week is today? Everyone raise their hand, Monday. No. What day in order is it? Everyone, first day. Wrong, they would say. It's the second day of the week. Sunday is the first day of the week. It's Catholic nuns. And in your calendar, look at your calendar, you'll see that. That's what they would say. And I had that happen 2 or 3 times. And that came to my mind. And it stopped me in the middle of saying Sunday, in Spanish to him. I said, Saturday? Just like that. And he said to me, study was over. He had nowhere to tell me anyway. And that's where, and I was in a daze. And I just drove home. Like, I remember driving home, like, I didn't know what people were beeping at me or not. And I got home and I was really in a daze. And so I started from that moment to study the Bible. I said, I'm not going to stop until every night, I'm going to spend an hour or two every night. I'm not going to put this Bible down until I find somewhere where there's a change. Because I said to myself, they just don't know about it. It's very simple because the Catholic Church they'll have every 3 years a rotation of the readings in church. They have usually a psalm or a proverb maybe. Then they'll have a writing of Paul. Then they'll have the gospel writing before they do their homily or sermon. And none of that would actually ever be usually called into the sermon. It's just usually just readings they do every week and it repeats itself every 3 years. And so you cover about 0.1% of the Bible in that time period. And so you have some Bible, but very, very little. And so I am saying they just don't know it. Since they're not such a heavily biblical church, they just don't realize they've kind of made a change here. So I got to go talk to Father Joe. I got to go talk to so-and-so. I got to talk to whoever I got to talk to. I said to myself, he's a small fry. I'm going to have to go to, obviously, the Pope because he doesn't know. And once I go to Rome and tell him, they'll know. That's exactly what was in my mind, not word for word. That's exactly what I was thinking. I said, no one knows about this. And so I embarked on this 1-year journey, Javier and I, of studying the Word. And I would read it every single night. And I'd show up to Javier's house on Saturday morning, Sabbath. And we would go there now in our own, crude way of keeping the Sabbath. We knew nothing. We're just kind of reading through the Bible. He knew a lot more of the Bible than I did because he had been studying it, remember? And I'm at his house studying, and I find out what happened, how he found out, okay? Because that's always the question. People say, if I don't tell it, people will say, how did he find out? And so how it was, again, Javier was not approached by a Seventh-day Adventist. That's why I was able to give those quotes in the beginning and say sometimes God takes us from where we are and pulls us there himself because we are not doing our job. And so Javier was studying Revelation over and over and over and didn't understand it. He had read through it probably about a dozen times over the course of 3 years and never understood it. He said not even one word of it. Couldn't understand it, the symbolism. Well, he's studying it one night and then he went to bed and he heard his voice, Javier, or his name, sorry, with a different voice, Javier, and he woke up. And so he's awake, sitting in his bed, and he heard, what you're reading in Revelation is true and is coming to its fulfillment now. And he says, when? No answer. And that was it. So he started studying Revelation over and over and over again every single night. Well, the time that I met my wife, now he's studying Revelation now. And finally, as he had a concern about the commandments of God, he had brought them up to me before when he asked me questions before all of this. And he had known that the Sabbath was Saturday. But he just thought it was of no importance because the Catholic Church knows what they're doing. That's what it was. That's what everyone does, right? If you talk to somebody who goes to your Methodist church or Baptist church, the church knows what it's doing. These people are very highly educated. And yet we have babes here who know more than them. And so Javier started studying, he started seeing commandments mentioned in Revelation and obedience to it through Revelation. And it's hit him on the 12th night, he said, when I just remembered second and fourth commandments were off. He knew they were off for years. He had already stopped dealing anything with any imagery or idols of any kind of way whatsoever. He had already stopped that years earlier. And the Sabbath, now he says it's the Sabbath, and it's both of them are part of Revelation. Now, this is not Joseph Bates, right? When he came and put together the Sabbath, and Joseph Bates did in the Great Controversy back in 1845 and 1846, and he was the one who really pushed it. This was Javier Leon in Providence, Rhode Island, who came to me, and I was the only one who listened to him. That's not true. There's one other who listened to him. There's a friend of his from childhood who also worked with me and him in the same place. She listened to him. And she ended up having a brother who was a Jehovah's Witness, who in that time, right in that time period, had become Seventh-day Adventist. So now Maritza and I are keeping Sabbath, along with Javier. And then Maritza's brother hears this and gives her the Great Controversy to give to Javier in Spanish. I see the book. If you remember the cover, it has a world on it and different, things fighting over the world. When I was in 10th grade religion class, the brother so-and-so, I forget his name, he picked, it was a Bible class. 10th grade was Bible class. And so we went through the Good News Bible. We went through the whole thing in a year. Didn't learn much, but we went through the whole thing, read 50 pages this week and that kind of. And so he picked up a book and said, class, don't read this book. It says bad things about the Catholic Church. This is 15 years earlier. I was in 10th grade. And I remember seeing the cover on Javier's desk when we were studying together. I'm like, where'd you get that book from? I said, that book was banned by the Catholic Church. And it was that same book 15 years earlier. It was a great controversy. So anyway, Javier then sought me out, and that's how I got to where I was. We're studying together every Sabbath. I got there at 9 in the morning, leave around 9 at night, and study, read, asking questions back and forth. Why this? Why this? Why this? Why did David have, why did Solomon have so many wives? All this kind of stuff. Everything in the Bible, everything, going through it all. Writing our own little stories, writing our own little testimonies. His in Spanish, mine in English. And in that time period, I did a search. This is 1998. I did a search on the crude internet for Seventh-day, Christians, Seventh-day Sabbath-keeping Christians. And I found a small list, about 5 or 6 of them, and the top one was Seventh-day Adventist. So I clicked on Seventh-day Adventist. This is before the other connection through the friend of the friend, Javier's friend. And it was the first time either one of us had heard of Seventh-day Adventist. First time I did. And I look at it, it says 27 fundamental beliefs at the time. I'm reading through and I said, okay, some of these things are pretty, okay, I agree with most of the stuff here. And I made a bookmark and I said, I'll go back to that when I finish going through the Bible at least once, if not twice. And I never went back to that page. Never went back to it. After about 6 months of studying and studying, I bought the Great Controversy. And I started reading that on Friday nights as I read the Bible. Friday night and every other time. It was just the Bible I was reading. I only wanted to know the Bible. I didn't care about anything else. I wanted to know what the Bible had to say. And I was reading and studying. And in that time period, I was convicted of because it is written. Javier had that in his heart. And apparently I had it in my heart. It is written, a fondness for it. And in there, what I saw was that I said to Javier, I said, you're baptized as a baby, and so was I. And I'm finding that we have to repent. And he didn't disagree at all. He's sitting there listening. I said, I've got to get baptized again. So do you. He says, yeah. Okay. Going through tithing. I said, donating some money to Christian Children's Fund and this kind of stuff. That made me feel better that I was giving money. Not tithing. Not tithing. Going to the Lord's work specifically. And that's an offering maybe. And I said to him, I'm not tithing. Neither are you. And he was in agreement because we go back and forth. And we would have a lot of interesting conversations. As you can imagine, we're there all day. And I'd see him at work too. And sometimes he pulled me aside when talking at work. And we were both, this work that we're at now is just a distraction. This is such a distraction. We were just talking. He and I were going door to door in Providence, Rhode Island, looking for people to study with. And most people who are Hispanic there, and that was his strength. I was learning Spanish. I was choppy, and so we would go. And some people would invite us in. We'd sit there and talk about the Sabbath with them. We had no clue what we were doing, but we were just going forward. The Spirit was leading, and we were just talking about the Sabbath in the best way we could. Answering objections the best way we could. And of course, you take your lumps too when you do that. You go there and you don't know the Bible well enough, and someone knows it better than you, and they say, "Oh, it's because of this, this, and this." And the Holy Spirit speaks to you, and you say something, you right back to him like that, and like, where'd that come from? And I was reading that just last week, and so it's like baptism by fire is what it was. It was just right in the middle of it. And so I said, Harry, is a third reason. It says in here that we are to not forsake the assembling of the saints. We are to have a holy convocation on Sabbath with all the people. And I said, you and I, it's getting tired here. We got to get some people that we can join with that believe the same as we do. And so he went away. I did too at the same time as he did to Dominican Republic. At the end of '98, I went with my wife and her family, and just to see the old country and see the house and everything, and spend a couple of weeks there. And he went there for a month, in different part, totally different part. He was in the capital. I was up north. And so he ended up he went to a Seventh Adventist church. Said, now this has been 11 months into this, and he got baptized. And he came back telling me, guess what? I got baptized in the Seventh Adventist. We had, at this point, we had known all about the Seventh Adventist church. We were just holding it off and saying, we don't want to get brainwashed. I don't want to get brainwashed by anyone. The Bible has to speak to us. We're writing our own books. For a while, it was Javier and I against the world. In our minds, no one kept the Sabbath except for Javier and I. That's what it was for a while. That's how I understood it. I'm sitting in this little room in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, looking through a little side window at four tops of some houses. And as I sat there for 12 hours a day on a Sabbath, watching that, how are we going to conquer this world? How are we going to do it? The Lord's going to do a lot of work in order for us to take over this world. And so we ended up eventually, he says, oh, it's great. And he goes, I'm going to the church here now, he says, on Sabbath, and I'll tell you all about it. So he went to one in Providence, Rhode Island, came back. I said, okay, I'll meet you at 1 o'clock at your house. And we met him at 1. He tells me, oh, it's really great. Sabbath school, blah, 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 all this stuff. And he's telling me, I said, yeah, but you keep going, Javier. I'm not there yet. I'm not convinced. I'm not going to walk in there and have somebody tell me this, that, and the other thing when I know the Bible very well. We're going there to tell them. They're not telling us. This is what our attitude was. And so, and the Lord had to shake that out of us, and he did. But he actually did something to me the next 2 weeks later that opened my mind. It was another testimony in itself. Side angle one here, I'm not gonna get into, that told me to go to the church. So I looked up in the Bible, I put my yellow pages, find this one 4 miles down the road. I didn't even know that. Okay. I've driven by this church so many times, I never even knew it was there. Shame on us, right? And I drive right by there, and I see this white church, 7th, I pull in, and I say, okay, prayer meeting Wednesday, 7 o'clock. Okay. I was on a Sunday, I'd go back. I walked in at 7 o'clock on Sunday, 4 dear saints there, 4 elderly ladies. That's everyone. Prayer meeting, should be going to it, right? You know who I'm talking to here, right? I don't know anyone who the attendance on prayer meeting. You should be there. There was 4 ladies there, and I ended up telling them my testimony for over an hour. They had Lonnie Melashenko ready to be on some wheeled-in TV and Discover Bible. They said, oh, we'll put this aside. Who are you? And I told my story, and they were like this the whole time. And I told them some things I'm not going to tell you because of that 1 hour time limit. And but I'll tell you a couple of them. And this is everything I'm telling you is obviously I wouldn't be standing here if I'm not telling you 100% of what happened. I'm on a Friday night in that 1 year that I spent studying the Bible with Javier in my house. And I lived, actually I had a roommate, but he was always gone. And I'm there on a Friday evening. And he was a roommate who his brother was a Lutheran pastor. And so he had to live separate from his girlfriend, because of how it looked for the pastor. But every Friday he would go, and be going and come back Sunday night. But he'd live with me. And so on Friday evenings, I'm walking through the house with a text in my mind. And I'm saying, okay, blah, 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 Jesus says, if your eye offends you, pluck it out. He's talking seriously here. This is how serious we have to be. Be able to pluck our eyes out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going over this in my mind quietly, not talking out loud, thinking about this, pacing around. I'm going to say this to so-and-so and talk to so-and-so, et cetera. And then I go to Javier Sabbath morning, 9 o'clock, knock on his door, go up the stairs, knock on his door. He'd open the door, we'd come in, we'd kneel and pray. About 15 minutes on hardwood floor. I didn't remember that, would never forget it. Get up every time my knees are hurting. We sit down on his table, open our Bibles, and Javier would always start with a Bible text, and we'd study it together for an hour or so, and then we'd go off and do our own study, private studying, sitting there. And he would, he'd always start and say, okay, today, because he knew the Bible better than me, we're going to do this. Well, that next day, he's like, oh, today's text, the same one from the night before. So, great. I was studying that. I know it. Oh, Javier, that's being literal. No, it's not. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Blah, 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 blah. After an hour, I just felt like just to release. I was wrong. Javier, you're right. That made sense. I've been fighting you all this time. That's right. Next Friday night, another text, different part of the Bible. Not the next paragraph, page, or anything. Part of the Bible. Prayer. Today's text. That text. Whoa. Goosebumps a little bit. What's going on here? Same thing. I studied this one. You're right, Javier. Next Friday night, another text. Today's text. Whoa. Exact text. So I go home and I'm looking for cameras. I'm looking for something. I'm looking for something in my house. This is 98, and watch stuff you could do. And I said, wow, that's amazing. And so the next one, I said, I dare you do whatever it was, John chapter 2, whatever it was. Today's text, look at it, John chapter 2. 15 times in that year it happened. Not every time, but 15 times. And I was at a point where I was just saying, like, it's going to be Mark chapter 9. I know it is Mark chapter 9. And it was just amazing. I'm not making any of this up 100%. I'm sitting there. A number of things like that were happening in that year as it was me and Javier against the world in our minds. And so, and it is a number of others. I came to the church, came in right away, and your prior pastor, Tom Dombrowski, had just left. That was his first district. He was there for about a year, and he had left. This was February. I came in February of 1999 now, and he had left, I think, end of December 98, something like that. And so they were without a pastor, and they had a retired pastor, William Johnson. He was in his 80s. And he and I connected very well, hit it off. I started studying, and became a church member right away, baptized, talking to my wife for a bit. She has her own powerful story. And I was dabbling into it for just a few seconds. She was with her big Catholic youth group. She was friends with. All of them went to the University of Rhode Island together, where I had gone to school. She was going to school. About 12 of them probably, all great friends. They're still friends to this day, all Catholic. And they were pulling her in one direction. Her new boyfriend pulling her in another direction, and then she had another one who was evangelical friend of hers pulling her in another direction. And she went through this for about a year. Well, I was studying with Javier, and I'd be telling her this. I go over her house after Javier's and tell her the whole, different things, and so not the probably the most romantic first year you'd say when you're dating someone that your boyfriend's all like wired with all this stuff he's got to save the world, and so she was kind of like, okay, when she heard us, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Finally, she went to a priest, and I have to thank the priest for this. He did in one quick meeting what I was hoping that would happen. And she asked him, all the stuff I had been bringing up. Why do we have masses for the dead? Why do we have this stuff for Mary? All this stuff. And every answer that the priest gave her was something that was not biblical. And it was something that made no sense almost. It was like, people have to do that, oh, they're accustomed to doing that, huh? And so finally she said, this is crazy. Wow. She said, and I didn't know this happened until months later. She told me this months later. So I went there and I asked him, I said, what about the Sabbath? I asked him, I said, what day's the Sabbath? Isn't it Saturday? And he said, yes, it is Saturday is the Sabbath. And she said, well, why do we go to church on Sunday? Oh, because people have to work on Saturday. And she's like, she's sitting there like in disbelief, and she said, "But isn't the Bible?" She says, "Elena, the Bible is just a literary work. You don't have to take it so seriously." Thank you very much. And she left right then. And I have to this day, I go find him and see if he's still alive somewhere and thank him. But we went through, and then she got baptized along with my brother, who was in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, one out of 5 of the other ones. And we ended up moving forward. I was going to go into being a pastor right away, and then we got a brand new pastor come, and he was a pastor from Connecticut. He went over there, Bill Warcholik. Yeah, you know Bill. Yeah, some of you guys know Bill. And so he ended up wanting me to go. He wanted me to go. Thank you. And he wanted me to go to seminary. I wasn't ready. Lord knew that. And my wife wasn't even graduated from college yet, and she wasn't even baptized yet. She got baptized the next month, the same day as my brother. And I was about to go off to seminary in August of 99. But we got married the next May of 2000, my wife and I. It was the best thing to do, was to stay home. And then we were trying to get into ministries and different ones. We loved Maranatha. We applied there because they asked us to apply. We were on a Maranatha tour in Dominican Republic, and her and I were doing all the translating, and it's a large group, 100 and some odd people. And so the director said, once you come and apply for it is written, we want you to work in country where we go next. I said, sure. And we applied, and that went on for a couple of years. And then when that ended is when I went into seminary. When that door was shut, I said, okay, the Lord wants me to go into seminary because I kind of felt that since I was a little kid, remember? And so as I was about to go into seminary, I found out that there was divinely appointed by God. I found out that I didn't have to move, because I was going to move to Andrews. And my father-in-law, my wife's father, was sick, and we were about to move, and we we're going to move that summer. And that's when I heard about this other program, which was a Master in Pastoral Ministry, which allows you to stay local and take your classes at the local Union College, which was Atlantic Union College at the time. But there was professors flew in, and you had these concentrated classes, but you needed 4 weeks off a year. You needed 4 weeks off. My wife was home. She was with the kids. I have 4 kids, 3 at that time. And so we had to kind of figure out, I have 3 weeks vacation. I've had 3 weeks vacation since day 1, 3 weeks, and I will not get another one. I've been there 15 years working, and I have 3 weeks vacation. No way, no one, not even the president, no one has more than 3 weeks vacation. That's how it went in that company. So I had to then take a week without pay, which was very tough to do when you have a family with little kids and just my pay, and also very tough to do when they required you to cancel your health insurance for that week, and go through all that mess. And I'm like, Lord, you're going to have to figure out a way here. I'm going forward with this, because I felt this for years now. And so I ended up applying and being accepted for the program. The program was people over 35, and I was 38 at the time or so. And I'm going into this, but you need the 4 weeks. And so I ordered the books, got the books, the syllabus for the class, 2 classes coming up in April of that year. And it was end of March. In the end that week, the company that I worked for said new ownership had came in the month before, and they said, we're going to have a meeting for everyone in the company. We're going to go down to the hotel, so don't get it was a factory, so dress up instead of wear your factory clothes, and we're going to go in buses down there. We're going to have a big meal and everything. We got great announcements. So the president gets up there when everyone's hanging around and people over there drinking their wine and all this kind of stuff, and I'm sitting there curious what was going on. And he said, okay, some great news. He said, very first thing out of his mouth, great news for all of those who have been here for 10 years or more, 4 weeks vacation. And I just remember these people the 2 ladies next to me hitting their wine glasses together, drink. And I said, these people just don't realize that they're getting an extra week vacation because God wants me to be a pastor. And so I get into the program, we go through the program, and then I became a pastor. I was out in Kansas. My wife's like, I'll go there. I'll be a pastor's wife with you anywhere you go. I know it's a calling. I just don't want to go anywhere where there's tornadoes. Anywhere with his tornadoes. And I tried here applying many times, Southern New England, no experience. Northern New England, New York Conference, Greater New York Conference, all the closer ones. The one place out of all the conferences that it offered me a position, because I was 42 years old at the time, they don't like to hire older pastors first time because you kind of get set in your ways. That's what they kind of explained, was Kansas. So I said, guess where we're going, honey? We're going to Kansas. I remember Toto and all this stuff. Yeah, that place. So we went to Kansas, and we get there, and it was fantastic pastoring there. And, from a pastor's perspective, there's always bumps along the road. There's always things you have to deal with. But they were wide open to traditional evangelism, which they really hadn't done in years, in years. One of the churches that I was with, you probably remember the name Dodge City, right? Dodge City, very famous, old Western town, Gunsmoke, the show. Dodge City, that church had 5 members in it and 2 visitors who were kept saying, they were Seventh Adventists. They said, we're not going to transfer our membership here. We'll just wait to go somewhere else and move somewhere else. That church hadn't had a baptism in 20 some odd years. And matter of fact, in their baptistry was a Christmas tree in there, and that's where they kept it. That's what I said, that's for our Christmas tree. Well, right away, I started pushing traditional evangelism because I was very in favor of that, as getting our message out there. And people will say to me, well, it's Christ's method alone, which I fully agree with. Christ's method alone, right? Ministry Healing 143, Christ's method alone. Mingle with people, right? Get to know them, show that you care about them, and then bid them to follow you, right? Now, I agree 100% with that. And so we have to have our programs and things that we do that are part of our DNA that really reach out to the public around us, health, chat, different things that are to connect with people and then bid them to follow you. That works for a very, very high percentage. Does it work for everyone? Okay. You come to my house when I was 30 years old and knock on my door. Now, I used to ride bike 100 miles at a time. I was a competitive biker. I used to lift weights all the time. Can't tell now, but I used to. And I used to play almost any sport you can imagine. You come knock at my door and 2 saints from the Adventist church, oh, we have a health program. I would have probably laughed and slammed the door in your face. If you said, oh, we have some food to hand out for you. Oh, we have some clothing. We have this, have that. Blah, 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 blah. Every single one of those things. I get that at my church. I'm involved at my big Catholic church. Our church is this big. Your church is that big. We feed a lot more people than you do. Okay? That's what I would have told you. But if you said to me, Sabbath is Saturday, boom, that would have really hit me. Because a small percentage of people out there really, really, really care about God's commandments and about his ways. Small percentage have that, and they're not hearing it through other ways. There's so many people out there that when we invite, especially people on the wealthier end, they really have not much need for what we offer them. Oh, you come with chat. Well, I have this specialist and this doctor and this one and that one there, and that's all I want to hear. I don't even want to hear about your natural self. I don't want to hear about it. And so what's the way in there? It's very hard. Isn't it hard? Lots of prayer needs to be done, of course, in these areas. But within that Ministry of Healing quote, it says the ignorant need to be instructed. And there are those who are ignorant, like I was very ignorant, thinking I knew everything. I was in the right church, the mother of churches, Catholic Church. Who could be more proud than that? Right? I got an MBA one time, and I had it was international business, and the classroom was from all parts of the world. And so they asked, express religion. I would go there, and I was the one who went up there, and I did a whole presentation on Catholicism, telling them, well, yeah, we're the first, Christian religion, first this, we do this, we're the mother church, that kind of thing. And that was just a couple of years, 2 years before I became a Sabbath keeper, 3 years. And so I come to Connecticut, pastored here for over 6 years, and COVID hit. And you remember that very well, right? Because you guys were like the only church. Were you the only church that stayed open? Maybe the only one, maybe? I'm thinking, or one of the only ones in the conference. I don't know. But we all knew that you were open. And, in our churches, I dealt with it in a way that was comfortable for a lot of people. They wouldn't show up if they didn't, if you didn't have a mask up. They wouldn't even come close to the church. And so I was kind of taken aback in the first week when I saw all the stuff flying off the shelves, right? Remember that in March of 2020? And everyone's kind of like, oh, what's going on here? And I said, we have a message for people. This COVID thing is concerning, but it's not scary because we have the end from the beginning, don't we? Okay? It may take our lives, but we have God's word that tells us that if we place ourselves in God's hands, what man can take us out? No man can pluck us out of his hands. And so I was like saying to myself, okay, I'm going to put together, I have a Daniel seminar that I'm going to do. I'm going to put this together. I'm going to go send it out. I do it by Zoom to everyone that I could possibly do it to and try and get, maybe like 20 visitors maybe online, maybe, I don't know what I get, maybe 10, 20, 30. I'd love to see 100. but I'd love to see 10 too. And I said, but what's happening with the church? Why isn't the NAD doing something? Why isn't something big happening now? This is late March of 2020. And then I got a phone call from then Minnesota coordinator, director John Moa, and he called up and said, Pastor, would you have interest? You like out of all the pastors in the conference are probably the most known for doing traditional evangelism. Would you have interest in Hope Awakens by It Is Written? I say, what is it? He goes, oh, it's a series. I said, instantly, I said, yes. So then he went and got all the pastors on board. He had a meeting with us through Zoom, and a number signed up. I'm not sure how many signed up. I'm not sure if you guys did or not, probably, perhaps. I signed all three of my churches up for it, and I'm getting all excited. And I had never heard John Bradshaw preach, and he had been the director for 10 years there. You know, as a pastor, I did not even have Adventist TV. I didn't have no time for that. If I'm going to have any free time, I'm going to be studying God's Word. I'm going to be reading Ellen White's books. I'm going to have I got a stack of stuff to read. I don't have time. And so I ended up signing everyone up. First night, John Bradshaw was freezing all over the place. The transmission was terrible. It was a nightmare. I'm just praying, Lord, this is such a poor first impression for the people. Praying. The next day, we had our debriefing from the evangelism coordinator at It Is Written. He says, we had someone, a hacker hack in, and there was a virus that was placed in. I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. We do this kind of stuff. I was at a donor's house visiting in West Virginia this week, and they showed me. He said, show me a picture. It says, It Is Written letterhead, letter to them, and on the outside was a sticker saying some kind of thing, like you're all going to hell, or some kind of thing, as if it came from It Is Written. Who does these kind of things? Who does these kind of things? And so they solved the problem of the virus, and they made sure it wasn't going to happen again. But he said, yesterday morning, tornadoes went to Oulton, Tennessee, where the headquarters are. They went through it, which is not super rare, but they went through. If you know, the brand new building had opened in September of 2019. So now we're like 7 months later. And there's trees on this side and trees on that side, and there's the building, 2 stories high, very large building, beautiful building, does over 1,000 programs a year. It's constantly being used. Every penny of it's being used. Tornado comes through and breaks the branches down on this side and chops these in half, and not a penny damage to the building. Not one, an impossibility, not a penny of damage. God put his hand there and said, nuh-uh. And we heard the story, and so I'm paying a lot more attention now to everything that John Bradshaw is saying. I sign up my churches for all 3 churches for everything that It Is Written is doing, because they're doing it online. And they were the first ones. They were ready. They were on top of things. Boom, they were there, instantly ready to go. And I just was like, I was very impressed. And I heard John Bradshaw and his testimony, very similar to mine, coming from Catholicism. He's about my age, Irish background he has. He's a New Zealander. And so as we went through, that year I was very involved and connected to It Is Written. They gave me a call in early 2021, asking me if I wanted to be in the work for them in the Plan Giving and Trust Service Department as a ministry representative, leading out a few mission trips here and there. And I said, nah, that's not fun. I'm pastoring right now. And I said, but let me pray about it. I'm not going to brush something aside. Someone called me, and that's not how you deal with things. So let the Lord speak to you. And so we went, and this went on for a while. Nothing was clear. And the conference called and said, hey, we let up some of the, freeze from COVID, and we're going to move people. And we want to move you first up to Leominster. And, we have a house for you up in the conference there, because houses were really tight in 2021, if you remember, as everyone was trying to flee the cities and all the stuff that, it was happening. And people just, very few houses for sale. When they're for sale, they were going instantly. Very expensive. There was no house for sale. We have a house for you up here, a parsonage, and right on the campgrounds, the blue house right down the hill there. If you're going to, we have that for you, Leominster. Okay, but I need an answer right away. Can't give you an answer right away. I have to pray about it. And I said, right now, I'm 2.5 months dealing with It Is Written. And they've been waiting patiently, and I haven't got a clear answer from the Lord, and they're still waiting for me. And I've got a sabbatical coming in 1 month. I'm going away for a month to Dominican Republic, my wife's country. We're going to work on an orphanage there. We're going to do stuff for a month. And so I've got a lot going on right now. I'll let you know in maybe a couple of weeks. Okay. A couple of weeks go by, and I want to interview with It Is Written. I go there, come back, and I'm still the last day. It's the last day I have to leave. It's a Thursday when the office closes, and I'm leaving that Sunday to go on my trip, and I have a quarter, and I'm about to flip it. That's how it was. And I said, Lord, it's been 3.5 months, and I don't know It Is Written has been so good with me in so many ways. And I've just been doing this with them. And I am, concerned, well, will I be in the pulpit ever again? I can be in every Sabbath if I want to. Will I, all these things going through my mind. And that day I got a phone call, and it was kind of a long one from the conference. And it was kind of, pushing me, you got to get away, stay away from there, come over here, et cetera. This is the frontline work, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't really felt that was the Lord speaking through that person. And I said, I have to decide today by 5 o'clock. And that was 1 o'clock. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm driving to pick up my wife she was teaching over in school at Willimantic. And I was driving to pick her up. And I'm saying to myself, I just wish so-and-so from It Is Written would give me a call. I haven't talked to him in about a month. And in that drive, he calls. And I picked up and I'm talking to him. Obviously I'm a little more like this. He's not, I am. I'm like, okay, that was exactly the answer to my prayer. And I asked him, I said, I have a couple of things that are kind of out of the ordinary requests that I'm asking for, which is another issue altogether. And I dropped it on him. And he said, I don't see why that wouldn't be a problem. I said, really? And I said, oh. I said, I have to give you an answer. He goes, no, you can wait till after your sabbatical. They hadn't had a person in a position for 6 to 8 months. The ministry runs on planned gifts, runs on donations and planned gifts, runs on it 100%. It's a North American division entity, but it gets 2% of its money running from that, 2%, and 98% from donations and planned gifts. And so I had just been studying, not by coincidence. It was in Testimonies 2 and 3. Both of them, I had read through them 2 the year before and 3 about planned giving. And Sister White writes so much about planned giving. You wouldn't believe it. And it's eye-opening. You should really check it. I have a little booklet if you'd like it. It's on all her quotes on planned giving. And really, really something as a pastor I didn't know, I didn't understand. And it's critical that we look at, because it says in Revelation, it says, blessed are those, the dead, who die in the Lord from now on, right? Their works shall follow them. How do their works follow them? Unless you've done something really solid here. You've left a legacy in some way, spiritually with people and monetarily with people after you pass away. So anyway, as I read more and more about it, and I felt convicted, that last day did it for me. It was like so clear. Then some things I'm also leaving out. But anyway, I started with It Is Written then, and I found out after that all that It Is Written had. It wasn't because of what It Is Written was offering. It was a bunch of things I didn't even know. And I'm going to read some of the things here that we do, so I don't forget them. I know most off the top of my head because I deal with them. But we do over 1,000 recorded programs every year. It Is Written. That doesn't include the daily devotionals in Spanish and English. That's about 700 there. But we do 300 to 400 or more other programs, hour-long ones, different ones that we do that are seen by millions every year. We're on TBN on Sundays at 1:30. You'll see John Bradshaw on there. John Bradshaw is a very gifted, unique speaker. I've never met anyone like him in my life. Okay, and the most important thing is that he's using those gifts. That's the most important thing. He's using the gifts nonstop. The man is absolutely nonstop. I pray for him that he doesn't, just drop. Yeah. All sorts of media. The media has changed over years. We're a media ministry. We're experts in media. And what we use nowadays? What is everything nowadays is media, everything. And so the days of doing the programs that I used to love doing, was having everyone come to a hotel or even to the church and have people come. You get a handful of people, you do. And I won't ever stop doing them till the day I die. But we know younger generation, anyone under 50 guaranteed, pretty much anyone at all nowadays uses electronics for everything. And so we're in that now. We're doing stuff in YouTube and shorts things and Instagram, everything we possibly can, but we're doing it in a professional way. We're not just kind of like blah, 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 blah. We're doing stuff that is done with a fantastic studio that we have and, with professional speakers. And so we're reaching every single day millions of people. It Is Written is seen in virtually every country in the world by many people in many different languages. We have an online Bible course. You can go on there online and it's 25 Bible studies you can do through them, and then you can get your little certificate at the end, and you can notify us. Some people have the school set up at the churches, and then whoever then is a pastor will find out all about the person doing the Bible studies. We have our flagship program going on since 1956. You've probably heard of AFCO, Amazing Facts College of Evangelism, excellent school. We have SALT, Soul Winning and Leadership Training. It's actually growing every single year because it's in conjunction with Southern Adventist University. It's right there. It's 2 miles down the road. SALT, we have 50 students this year, the largest number, huge number of people. A lot of them, college students, it's a whole semester long. They can get credit for it. A lot of adults, people at any different age, people in their 80s take it. So many people do that. Fantastic SALT training. We have, you probably didn't know, and I mentioned it briefly earlier, mission trips. You think of ADRA, you think of, right? Not ADRA, sorry, you think of Maranatha, mission trips, right? Maybe Quiet Hour, maybe a few others. It is written has mission trips, and they're excellent mission trips. I say that not only because I'll be leaving one out this year coming up. It has nothing to do with that at all. It's the fact that we cover all 3 things there. We do construction, we do health, medical, and we do preaching. So you're invited. If you come on a trip, you can say, I want to preach. We'll provide you the material. You prepare it beforehand. Everything's ready. You have is all prepared for you. You just kind of learn PowerPoint slides. And we have everything there for you. You can go and preach in another country that will provide a translator for you, everything. The last trip I let out was in Bolivia, and there was 10 groups we had. 10 groups, and most of them, young people, most of them were academy kids. Most of them. 7 out of the 10 groups were academy kids. One from Watcher Hills in Arkansas, and the other one was, the rest were all from Greenville Academy in Tennessee. And then also my kids. That was an 8th one. They were academy age. And then it was myself and another doctor, but the doctor's working all day in the medical clinic. Then at nighttime, runs to go preach, and I'm doing the same thing back and forth. And you have so many. You don't have to rush that much. But man, that trip goes right by. You can't even believe it. You're there for 11 days, and it's like, whew. And we have an excursion plan. Everything that's going on next year. We have the end of this year. We're in Timor-Leste, Puerto Rico. Right now they're in Timor-Leste in December, and then we go to Honduras, an island off of Honduras in Roatan Island in February. I may lead that one. I'll find out this month. And then the next one is Ethiopia in April. And that's a return trip. They were there 2 years ago, and they have that's big crowds you get, huge crowds, thousands baptized kind of thing. And then we have also Dominican Republic in May. If I don't do that one in February, I'll be doing the May one. And that's all SALT students, a lot of SALT students, but anyone can join. There's 30 SALT students going there, the ones from that training thing. And then we have Baltimore, Maryland, if you want to stay stateside in September. And there's a lot of medical work we're doing there before a long series that we're doing there by John Bradshaw. And then in December is Ecuador. So we do these meetings these mission trips every year. And Eyes for India. Have anyone ever heard of Eyes for India? Eyes for India. It's our humanitarian project. Probably the best I've ever heard, ever. There's an Adventist doctor in India who is an eye doctor, an ophthalmologist there's a certain issue in India where there's a lot of children born with a certain type of cataract, not your regular cataract. And so this doctor has a system where he replaces cataracts in a minute and a half. And he doesn't stop 12 hours. Dr. Jacob Prodaka, he does it all week long. He'll do it these few times a year. And we fund it for him. We raise money for Eyes for India. It's about $75 an eye for all the stuff. And it's just, none of these people who are coming there are Christian by any sort of the way, but they leave with Christian material. They leave with our material, Seventh Adventist doctor. And there you have so many testimonies. Oh, I want to know more about, Christ, that kind of stuff. And it's just fantastic that he goes there and he sits there, just one eye, another eye, they wheel out, back in, wheel them out all day long. No bathroom break, no drink, no nothing, eat nothing all day long. He does that nonstop. He says, I want to get as many eyes done as possible. He does that. He does about 3,000 eyes a year. And now he's going on one of our trips a year. Every year he goes to one of our trips. He goes outside of India. And so he's doing a lot of work. We have all our stuff online. It is written.tv. You'll see every word, daily devotionals. You get them on daily devotionals on your phone. You can get them every time, every day. Ding, ding, in English and Spanish. In the Word, which is sermons for churches. If you don't have a sermon prepared, go to itiswritten.tv. Go to In the Word. You get a whole bunch to choose from. Just play it. Really good sermons by John Bradshaw. Sabbath School, Eric Flickinger. Have you ever, anyone's ever seen Sabbath School, Eric Flickinger? Okay. What's the unique thing about it? Do you know what the unique thing about our Sabbath School is, other than everyone else's? Because all the other ones are good too. This one is the interview with the author. We fly the author to the studios, and so the author who wrote the thing is interviewed. You get that unique, input. Doesn't mean that the author is infallible. It's just that you get that unique input, and that's a half an hour of that short. You can look at it on a Friday night before you come in on Sabbath and may get a little bit of input from there. It's the most watched program that we have, actually. Every week it's on, and like 40,000 people so watch it on itiswritten.tv. My Place with Jesus, children's program. We just came out with Flight 316, a new VBS program, or 2 VBS programs. If you want one, we have them. Fantastic for VBS. Line Upon Line, Bible Questions and Answers. And then Escrito Está, Spanish version. That is 30 years this year. That is I can go on for Escrito Está for an hour with the stuff they do. They have their 6 programs that they do in Spanish, the TV programs. And then he just does a fantastic job down in South America, Robert Costa. And we were there in that Bolivia trip. He was there when we were there. And so we brought all of our churches there to a big stadium. And there was a bunch of baptisms. I had the privilege of being there on TV and baptizing, that kind of stuff. All South America Adventist TV. And he's always doing these reaping meetings, reaping. And he just goes to South America. It's thousands and thousands of baptisms of people who've been worked with beforehand. And then there's It Is Written Classics. You like George Vanderman, you can watch all of George Vanderman stuff. And a whole bunch of other stuff that we have. It's a bit, there's a lot to grasp what It Is Written does. And as my testimony this time is called something different before, obviously. Now it's called It Is Written to It Is Written. The Lord has me in It Is Written, and there's no question about it. I went into It Is Written saying, Lord, you made it clear this is where you want me to be. Show me it. And so I started learning the new position, new stuff, traveling a lot, all this kind of stuff. And I wasn't fully convinced all along. I'm saying, Lord, show me why. And last June of 2023, I was visiting my mother in Rhode Island. I was in Connecticut here, my house, and I was visiting my mother, and I noticed, she has Alzheimer's, and my brother lives with her, but he's not really capable of taking care of her. I noticed I was there visiting because my wife's brother in Providence was dying of cancer, and so I'm there every weekend, like 5 weekends in a row from Friday to Sunday. And so I'm staying at my mother's house, visiting the brother-in-law, etc. And I'm watching my mother, and she just is so bad. Wow, I didn't even realize that she was nearly as bad as she is. No one realizes this. And as far as it's very unsanitary, everything was just, so we decided, we're sitting over here in New Britain, Connecticut. Let's move into her house. And so we moved last summer into her house. I said, okay, Lord, I'm kind of starting to see why you have us, had me in a flexible ministry where I wasn't fixed in Leominster or somewhere. And then we're there for 2 weeks. And then my brother, who had been sick, had a colonoscopy done. He came back and said, oh, results are in, I've got cancer. And he can't take care of himself. He needed a lot of help and guidance. And I would never been able to take him to all his doctor's appointments and all the things that he went through. Never. And he ended up, he's doing well now. Praise the Lord. He's cancer-free at this moment. Just had his final test. 6 months after his last test was a couple of days ago, and he came back clean still so far. So we praise the Lord for that. But I could see that the Lord had me there so I could also minister to my family. And so we don't know what the Lord's going to do and why he takes us from here to there, why we came from there to here, why we moved to this country from somewhere else. We don't know these things, but the Lord has it in his plans. He knows exactly why you're where you're at. Just be faithful and be open and looking for it. Be prayerful and be open to look for the Lord's work and understand and recognize when he does work in your life. It Is Written I am hoping, it's my prayer that you treasure It Is Written as much as I do. Not just the ministry, but more important, the Word of God.